Welcome to the Successfully Unemployed Show. My name is Dustin Heiner, and I'm here to help you learn how to quit that JOB, that just over broke job, by investing, by having a side hustle, by starting your own business in every which way. And today, I brought on an expert who's going to show us how she became successfully unemployed as well. She helps other people as well. Christine McCarron, thank you so much for being on the show with me.
Dustin, thanks so much for having me. I'm psyched to talk to you.
Man, this is great. So you have your own podcast. I was on that, and we got to know each other. And so now it's great having you on. Now, tell us a little bit about what you do to provide for yourself and your family without having to work that dead end job.
Yeah, it's funny because nobody who knows me would say that I'm like retired. Right. But yeah, like what you're saying, I don't have to get up every morning and go someplace and do something for somebody else. Nobody's paying me to do this. And the easy answer to that is house hacking.
Love it, love it. House hacking is terrific. I mean, if anybody's going to get started investing in real estate, if you're like, oh, I don't have that much money, no, house hack. That's by far. That's great. So, what were you doing before, Christine? That either like you were working a job before, like you had something, and then you got into this, and then now you're helping people. So, talk to us about your backstory.
Yeah, I've had a lot of different JOBs. The last one I had, it was working for a software company, basically. And that was fun because I lived in England for 2 years and stuff. It wasn't like that bad of a job, but still you're really at someone else's mercy as far as when you come and go and stuff. So that was my last real, what I would call job. But in between this, I actually also started an import company. So I was, because I like traveling and shopping, and I thought that would be fun.
So the import company importing things into the US or where you were living overseas?
When I came back here after I finished that stint, I was like, well, what do I want to do? I don't want to work anymore for like regular people. And I had enough money saved at that point to take some time off. So I started more interestingly and strangely, I guess, what it ended up being for the most part was I was importing belly dancing supplies from Morocco and Egypt.
Wow. Interesting. I mean,
you didn't expect that, did you?
No, Christine, I definitely did not expect that.
And I don't, and just if your next question, no, I do not belly dance myself.
Well, you found a product that people want. So that works out really well.
Yep.
Okay. So how did you get into what you're doing now with wholesaling or not? So wholesaling, house hacking.
Yeah. Well, so I used to do like kind of what you call a slow flip. Like I'd buy a house and I'd live in it for a couple of years. And during that time, I'd be in construction and mess and junk all over the place. As soon as it was livable, I'd be like, okay, I'm bored. And I would sell it and go do that again. But what I most recently did and what I loved doing was a true house hack. So where I took a single family house, I turned it into actually a legal 2-unit house. I had the other side on Airbnb. That person and whoever that would be that week was kind enough to pay all my bills, plus give me some extra, enough to really cover my living expenses. But that's actually something I want to say is that the reason that worked so well and so easily is because I don't have a lot of living expenses, right? So I don't need to have 100 properties. But each time I would sell one, I would always buy two. That was kind of my model. So and then each time I would buy a property, like one of my other projects was I bought this great little house up in the White Mountains, and it had a sort of a big shed in the backyard, and I turned that into a tiny house. So that was another sort of fun. That's really a house hack, right? Because you took something that wasn't there before and you kind of made it into a fun little, very, very economical sort of evening out or, place for people to stay. So
in house hacking, because I love the idea of house hacking. In fact, I teach a lot of my students how to do it as well, because you don't have to have a lot of money. In fact, if you're going to live anywhere, you're either going to rent or buy a house. So might as well be proactive and try to think, how can I turn this house into a rental property or that can make me money? So it seems like, because it sounded like you have a single family home that you are able to do you buy duplexes? Or is it like triplexes, or can you even do that with a single family home?
That's what it was. It was actually just a 1,200 square foot ranch. So not a very big property, but it was a 3-bedroom. So I took one half was basically, I turned the original kitchen into a kitchen living room combo, 1 bedroom and the original bathroom. On the other side, there was a half bath, which I turned into a full bath. A bedroom became the kitchen. The living room was the living room. And then it was just, so it ended up being 2 1-bedroom places, and they were really cute and nice. And it happened to be at a great location right on the beach. And so It was very popular on Airbnb.
That's terrific. Do you put up walls to separate everything?
Yeah, and that's basically all I mean, obviously I had to do one complete new kitchen, one half, addition of a bath, but the major construction was I just put the wall in and then that unit was ready to rent right away while I got mine kind of more more up and running.
So I got to ask, how many properties would you say you have now after doing this multiple times?
Well, so that's interesting because I just sold everything to buy two new places, one of which is it's a huge office space that I'm turning into like a WeWork kind of a co-working community. So that's like my new passion project. And then I just bought myself a condo like right downtown, right on like the main drag where there's all kinds of stuff going on. So
That's great. You're playing Monopoly. That's literally what we need to do is keep
well, it just felt
trading
like a
up.
good time to sell residential and buy commercial. So that's what I did.
You're 100% right. In fact, it might be Warren Buffett or somebody else, but they say when people are buying, you need to be selling. When people are selling, you need to be buying. And when I have people like I had have a cousin. He's in Pocatello, Idaho. Like a year ago, he said, Dustin, I know you want to move to Idaho. You need to buy now because now's the best time to buy it. Everybody's buying, it's going up. And I'm like, wait. So you're not an investor. Like you make pottery, pottery. Like that's what he does. And if you're telling me now's the time to invest in there, I know that's the absolute wrong time to invest. And so right now is a great time to sell because so many people are buying. So when you get started, it's all, fast forward to the end where you have properties, you can sell when people are buying because you already have the properties. But just to get started though, and to get to the point where you can sell, you have to have property. What do we need to do to make sure we can get that house hack, that first house hack? Actually, let me bigger, broader picture. What do we do to get started in that first house hack? And then talk to us a little bit more about how that house hacking actually works. Like, how do you even do that from starting to do that house hacking type thing?
So Dustin, not to like be like plugging my show, but I'm doing a series right now on my podcast, Women Creating Wealth, all about this. And the first one was actually how to do a house hack with no money and no house. Because there are actually people, I mean, rental arbitrage is one way, which I imagine you're familiar with that kind of phrase, but you can I just discovered this by mistake, that there are people on Airbnb who are renting land in people's yards or like farms or whatever, and they're renting them to people to put their tents. So that person has like zero investment, except I suppose you've got to have some type of facilities, but they don't have running water. You've got to bring your own water, everything. And it's just like a romantic thing out under the stars in someone's farm or whatever. And those people have nothing, right? They just started with a really ambitious, mindset, basically.
So that's terrific. And I personally am not a big fan of rental arbitrage. That's where you rent a place from somebody else. You buy, let's say, $5,000-$6,000 worth of furniture, put it in there, and then try to rent it out on Airbnb. You don't really own anything other than furniture. So I'm not a big fan of that. You can make money, which is good to get started. But, if coronavirus happens, then you're just stuck with inventory. You can't rent it out. All that to say.
And that's what makes me nervous about that whole scenario. Because most of the times you're tied in a lease.
Totally. And I want to own things, not just furniture that eventually falls apart and it doesn't appreciate. It's depreciating. I want to own assets like real estate that actually make me money. So to get started and the process of doing that, talk us through that entire process.
So the first thing you really have to do, you either have to have a partner who has money and or good credit, or you really have to have good credit yourself. Because if you're going to buy something and it's your very first thing, like even investors aren't going to say, oh yeah, you've never done this before and you have crappy credit and you've got none of your own money. I'd love to, front you up. I mean, right? What normal successful investor, right? You might get your mom to do that, right? But you're not going to get.
Well, I even had, I got to add, I have with my podcast, people reaching out to me, let's say on Instagram, and they say, hey, Dustin, like I have this, I've never done any investing. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have any experience, but will you lend me money? I'm like, no, I will not do that. How do I know I'm going to get my money back, let alone make any money? So you're 100% right.
Exactly. So get your credit in order at least, and then maybe, partner up. And this is actually the way I did it. The very first property that I bought as an investment, actually, okay, so I was like having limited success with real estate until I got to be 50 and I just said, oh my God, you're 50, get a grip, And so I had just okay credit. And I partnered with a friend of mine and we bought a very inexpensive property. And she was the one, she actually took out the loan because I didn't have good enough credit to do that. And that was the beginning of this whole thing. So that was just the matter of, I did have enough for the down payment, which was very small because I was living there. Right. So I got away with 5% down and then, plus the closing costs. And then she was actually my co-signer on the loan so that, I paid the mortgage, but, so that was how I got started with less than $10,000. Now that was 8 years ago. So, it's a little harder now, but there are markets where you can still buy a property for under 100,000. And that's what I would recommend starting with. I mean, not like in a horrible neighborhood where you have to be feared for your life every night, but there are places maybe outside the city, and look for a place that has potential. So a place where you can, like, how many things can I do here? Actually, the person I talked to the other day, she's renting out her swimming pool. Okay. So does it have a pool? Does it have a backyard that you can now, apparently that's a thing. You can rent your backyard to people with dogs who don't want to go to the dog park. And, or can I put a tent here? Can I put a camper? What can I do? How many different ways can I chop up this house so that I can make money here and potentially even live here as well? Or maybe I want to live with my parents while this thing gets going. But yeah, you just look for something. If it has a full basement that's dry and clean, that's a potential. If it has a garage, another potential. If it has yards, right? How many ways can I chop this up to make the maximum amount of money from everybody who wants to come stay with me?
So honestly, Chrissy, you just blew my mind thinking I could rent out my pool, like just the pool, rent that out. I was like, what? I never even thought that would be possible. But now when you said renting out your land and just have people put tents on there, like, wow, that is awesome. Like, it's like everything you have. Just think there is probably somebody that would want, like, you have extra storage in a storage unit. Well, there are storage units all over the place. So why not let somebody park their stuff there and then charge them rent? So I want to ask, when you're developing, let's say, a single family home, because I have plenty of properties and I was thinking if I were to put one of those and split up into a duplex or to have 2 units and do 2 Airbnbs, is there a lot of permitting processes? Is there a lot of things they have to go through the state? Have 2 entrances? Like, talk about the logistics of turning a single family, like one house that's for one family, turning that into 2. How do you do that?
Yeah, there definitely is a process involved in that. So if you buy a single family house and every single house on the street is a single family house, and you look at the zoning and it says single family, that's not going to work very well, most likely, because you do have to go, if it's not in an area that's already zoned for multiple units, then you'll have to go in front of the town. You have to speak to them and say, oh, hi, I want to, and they want to make sure you have plenty of parking and that whole thing. So there's always, I mean, I'm maybe in the Wild West, it's not like this, but in most metropolitan areas, there's going to be some type of rules around what you need to do in order to divide that property up into more.
With that property that we need to update, we talk to the city. Now, do you go to the city first to see what the zoning is first?
Yeah, and you can actually go online in most towns. Most towns now have an online zoning map, and you can just see, and you might see like, oh, if this house isn't zoned in a single family, but if I just go the next block over, those are all zone multi, and I can go ahead and do this by right, what they call by right, and then you just record your plans with the building department, and then you just do it. You don't have to have all these meetings and all this community involvement.
Yeah, that's great. So from there, you're making it 1 unit into 2 units, which is great for Airbnb because then you have 2 properties, basically 2 units, making you a lot more money. Now you're going to have a smaller place, which it's a different type of clientele, meaning it's not like a big family, like 4 or 5 kids, but you're going to get people coming in that definitely want to rent. So would you suggest more of using these for short-term Airbnb type properties, or would it be good for doing these as well as being long-term?
Yeah, and that's actually something that you want to do some research on. In some areas, you're going to make as much money, if not more, with a long-term situation. So, and also there are some areas where there are restrictions against short-term rentals. So that's part of your research process. And like I said, in some cases, especially if it's a very seasonal market where you're really going to be only rented for a few months a year for the most likely, then you say, all right, well, hey, why don't I just get somebody in there consistently? And then you have less overhead, right? You're not going to have to pay for their electricity and their cable bill and their internet and all that other stuff. So, sometimes that works better.
I like the idea of planning. There's like when I shared was on your podcast, I like to build a business. So when I build the business, I figure out what my inventory is going to do for me. If it's better at a long term, then I'm going to put it long term. If it's going to make a lot more money and I have the ability, which it usually does with a short term, if I'm going to make more money and I have the ability to manage that or have somebody manage, building the business, having other people do the work, and that's the better way to go, I pick that. Like we have options, even midterm, like, traveling nurses and things like that, where there's 6-month leases. So there's lots of ways to do it. Now, if we were to now scale, like we got our first one, which is great, and we have our house hack, we're living in one, renting out the other side, and we want to scale to the next property, what do we do?
That's when you have to decide if it makes sense for you to continue to live in this one. Because let's say, and I'm not advising anyone to make stuff up, but it's easier and less expensive to buy a home as an owner occupant. So if I'm going to now rent out my side of the property and go someplace and buy another one as an owner occupant, most likely, again, I'm going to be able to put 3.5 to 5% down, have much lower upfront costs, and then just kind of do the whole thing all over again.
So the 3.5% down is an FHA loan. I love doing that. In fact, my students have very low money. Like that's the first thing that you should do is utilize that FHA loan, especially if you are renting right now. Buy a house hack, use 3.5% down, which is not that much money. 3.5% is not much. If you're buying a $100,000 house, that's only $3,500. More than likely, somebody can save that much money to do it. And so I love the idea of scaling and then growing. Let's say you buy that house, do the first house hack, and then you buy the next house. You move into that one. So you're living in the first one, then you move into the second one. While you're doing the house hack, you can even do the work yourself, fixing up, changing toilets and all that sort of stuff. You can do that. Then now you have that property. That original property is also, it's a inventory that's working for you. You have two units now. And then you keep doing that over and over. Can we do this continually? And is there any other way to scale and grow the business even more?
One way that I really like is to sell the one that I just did. You've now added to its value by making it a 2-family. And most likely, depends on the market, right? So we've been in this lovely market, this beautiful market where, pretty much no matter what you do to it, you're going to make a little money. If that's the case, because usually even if the market has stayed stable, you still added some value by making it now a property that's going to make some money. So if you can sell that property, especially if it took you 2 years to do this, then you don't have any taxes to pay, right? You can sell that property and then buy 2. That's what I love to do. And sometimes, like, let's say, okay, I'm going to buy one down the street and I'm going to buy another one, in a lovely area that I love to visit. And that becomes your second home, which is 10% down, right? And that, and if you can do that every time, right? Sell one and buy 2, then you can obviously see how your properties are going to grow and go. But sometimes you don't have to sell. Sometimes it's not a great time to sell, but you can refinance, you can cash out, take some money enough to maybe still do the 2 and keep the one and buy 2 more. That's still a great deal. So
yeah, I think those are great ideas. I love the idea of taking the equity out, because when you sell, what you're trying to do is get the equity, get that money that you have to buy something else. I love taking the equity with a loan. It's a tax-free loan, which is great. You get that money, not tax, and then you can put that in there. So in other properties. So from there, what are some lessons learned? Like, is there anything that you've done wrong that, like, oh my goodness, you have to know, like, do this or don't do this? Any lessons that you have learned that you can share with us?
Well, 100% you have to do your research. You've got to look at the data, right? If you're doing this thing and you're thinking, okay, so I'm getting $120 a night and I'm going to get that 30 days out of the year. And then 30 days a month. And then and you start to do all this math and you're like, oh my God, like you got to have turnover time. You're not always going to be rented all the time. If your market's even remotely seasonal, right, then you're going to have times when there's nobody in there. So especially for Airbnb, I would use like 60% vacant. 60% occupancy as my number. So if you're making, $120 a night, then what is that, for just a fraction, like 150 or 170 nights or something like that. And then if your numbers work and you get to have 200 nights booked, you're golden. And the other thing is, people, it's so easy just to say, okay, so I've got, this is my mortgage and this is my income, and that everything else is profit. Not so much, right? If you're going to have a business, what's your, you're going to have a corporate fees, you're going to have taxes, you're going to have, the internet and you've got to remember that you've got to give, if you're doing short term, everything has to be in there, right? You got furniture, you got everything from forks and, sheets and everything. So, and think about that and your ongoing expenses for, toilet paper and, all the stuff that people are going to use up. So just make sure that you factor everything in, because then, worst case, you'll be pleasantly surprised, right? If you, instead of just thinking, oh yeah, I'm just going to,
Yeah, I'd much rather be surprised with making more money than surprised with, oh no, there's an expense. I'm losing money now. I
exactly.
hate those surprises. We don't want those.
Yeah.
So, Christine, this has been great, great information. Anything else that we might have missed? Any other question I probably should have asked that is really going to help us to learn how to house hack right?
Well, if you're going to use something like Airbnb, I mean, my big advice is just to make sure that you are really being so transparent about anything, even potentially negative. People are much more easygoing about something bad if they know about it ahead of time. Like, oh, sometimes the neighbor's dog barks a lot, or what, even on some stupid thing, the bathroom's kind of small. Anything that you think could even potentially be thought of as negative, just put that out there. People are that allows them to make their own decisions, and you're going to get a lot less complaints and a lot, everybody's happy then, because you want to be a super host. That's your goal.
That's a great point. So I stayed in was it Nashville? Yeah, I stayed in Nashville, and apparently in Nashville there's one street. I can't remember the name of the street. It's like one of the most popular streets, and it's so busy. And we stayed there, and we got there. Nice place. Don't get me wrong. I'm looking at the room itself was really, really nice. They did a good job. And I'm looking, oh man, the city is really popular. Or let's say this street is very popular. It's really, really nice. And then I go in the bathroom and I see earplugs, bunch of earplugs inside there. And I was like, huh. I wonder if they're thinking that we're sleeping next to snorers, or people we're with. Oh, that's thoughtful. But no, it was like 3 a.m. There were parties and bands and literally, it was so crazy loud, but I had no idea there was anything like that. They should have put that. Then I would have been like, oh man, I knew it going into it. So, okay. So that is a great, great point. So,
Yeah, I actually stayed in a place in Paris where it was on the fifth floor. And of course, in Paris, the first floor is zero. So it's actually 5 flights of stairs to get up there. And I mean, there was nothing about that in the write-up. I mean, the guy showed up to oh, let me help you with your bags. Like, thanks, because there's no flipping elevator. Okay. There's 5 gigantic flights of stairs because every place has 10-foot ceilings, each floor, and you're just like, oh my God. And my friend had just had knee surgery. There's no way in the world that we would have stayed there. She was hobbling, we only went up and down once a day.
how do you become, because you mentioned this keyword, superhost, or 2 words, how do you become a superhost? Is there any tips or any strategies that you can give us?
I guess put yourself in your guest's shoes is maybe the best. So if they complain about something, it's funny because the place that I sold on the beach, the new owners, I had some bookings and they are honoring them. And every time somebody comes in with a question, there's like, oh my God, are people stupid? I mean, what's wrong with these people? And I'm just like, yeah, I'm going to handle the communication. Okay. Because you just have to be like, it's not obvious to them, if you get there and there's a problem, like they came in and there was, because I'm not taking care of the cleaning anymore. I'm not able to micromanage it. Right. So the people came in and there was an odor in the house, and it turned out it was just the garbage disposal. No one had run it through, whatever. Well, so the guy's like, well, they should have known it was the garbage disposal. Well, how? First of all, and second of all, if I come in a place and it stinks, I don't care what it is, fix it. I'm not going to start fix it. So just be really quick and be responsive, be really transparent about anything negative. And also that you can utilize lots of automatic replies to stuff. And that's just a great way just to take some of the hassle off yourself. But in general, I guess my advice would be to be a real person, because we're much less likely to give a terrible review to someone who seems like a real person versus if it just seems like some company. Yeah, it's just kind of a weird thing to say, but I do think that it makes a difference. If people like you, you're more likely to get good reviews.
I totally agree. That's great. Man, that's great, Christine. So you have actually 2 podcasts, which everybody needs to check out. Now, talk to us about how people can find you, how they can listen to you, and actually start working with you if they want to do the same thing.
So this is Empower Your Inner Millionaire. That's the book. And so EYIMbook.com, which seems like a dumb name and is. But the podcasts are Women Creating Wealth. And there's actually some old ones of that name that aren't around anymore. So if you just do Women Creating Wealth, Christine, it'll pop right up. And the other one's called Get Your Fill, Financial Independence and Long Life. And for that one, you can just do Get Your Fill, Dustin, and your episode will pop right up. And then you can follow that one.
Yes, absolutely. Well, great, Christine. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate you coming on and also having me on your show as well. It's been great getting to know you, and hopefully people will be able to take advantage of house hacking is just by far amazing. So, but thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you, Dustin. I really appreciate it. Great talking to you.